Let's normalise deep conversations that don't need to be heavy. Surface level was so 5 years ago, so grab a cuppa, get comfy and let's chat. Tea Talk with Chelsea.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tea Talk. Today, I have my beautiful friend Ari, who is just going to share some wisdom with us, I know. Hopefully, we all have our cup of teas, but if not, that's okay. We are just here to normalize conversations around personal development, awareness, growth, healing, any of that. So come and join our little journey we get on today. And yeah, so Adi, if you could please introduce yourself, feel free to expand, extend anything you want, like speak about anything you want to introduce yourself and yeah, share a bit of your journey.
Thanks, Charles. Kia ora tātou, ko Ariana tōku ingoa no Rotorua ahau. My name is Adi from Rotorua, currently living in Papamoa, newly living in Papamoa. I am currently a life coach, so I've been working a lot on mindset, helping people to heal, helping people to connect to themselves and just be more in their authentic expression. Prior to that, I was working in the wellness industry, so a lot of my mahi was in helping people physically with their tinana, but more recently I've merged into this space, and it's somewhere where I feel I can be fully myself, where I'm challenged as well to constantly grow. But who am I? I feel like I have many facets to who I am. I am a very deep thinker. I love having these types of conversations. So when I was asked to do this, it was sure, of course, because I love to hear and see and be reflected back to the different whakaaro thoughts and ideas, I guess, that you get to have in these conversations. I'm also I like to be adventurous and playful and fun and love a bit of nature, love a bit of beach, love that I'm currently living on the beach as well. And I guess one thing about myself that I've been learning to be more accepting of is that I am both the light and the dark. So leaning into the uncomfy parts of myself, the expressions of myself that maybe look a little bit messy, and learning how to love that too, and knowing that those parts of me allow me to be more accepting of who I am. So I'm also all the messiness too. I also have lots of things that I'm learning along the way, and I love that this space lets me do that simultaneously as I teach and share and hold space for others. So yeah, that's pretty much me. I have one of 9 siblings as well, so a blended family, but I am the only child to my mum and my dad. My dad passed away 8 years ago, and that was an interesting experience, just moving through that grief. And I currently am in a relationship that I've been in for almost 3 years now, and just learning to develop and grow within relationship as well. And that's been really very interesting, very exciting, all the things. So that's a bit about me.
Thank you for sharing. You speak on relationships, and I guess it sort of brings up like things for me, because there's so many relationships that we have with not only like partners, but also with your parents, your siblings, your friends, the wider extended whānau. And I sort of feel like it's something that a lot of us forget to work on, because those people are just there. Those people are always there, and we feel like, oh, they're just always going to be there, so we don't need to work on this. Is there something with, like, say, and you don't have to share, you can just share as much as you want really, but with your partner or just anyone in your family or anything like that, around things that you've learned around actually needing to work on relationships and communication or things like that? Is there things that you've learned over the years that maybe you feel is important to share now to others?
Yeah. I think I'm trying to sort of think back. So prior to starting my journey, I think a lot of the things that I experienced in relationships, I perceived as happening to me when things were challenging. And I didn't understand the idea of life being a mirror. So I think definitely one of the biggest things that I've learned in relationships is how to notice those reflections and to understand that the things that we've been triggered by in any relationship is a call to action to look deeper within ourselves and to ask, well, why does it bother me that much? Why is it that this little thing or big thing is impacting me and is so amplified inside of me? So I learned to understand that, and then following that, I also, as I was sharing prior, I've been learning how to be more intimate with those uncomfortable emotions and to really sit and be with them consciously, that it's not my partner or my friend or my mum or my, you know, my family's job to be that conscious container for me. It's lovely if they can be, you know, great if you can be, but ultimately the source of comfort and stability and almost that safe masculine container that allows the feminine to be fully expressed is something that I get to be more in tune with. So one thing I've been learning about that part is that if I'm in regular communication with myself and I'm letting myself express my feelings and allowing myself to do that in its fullness, that I also become better at communicating with my partner, with my friends, with my mum and all of that, because there is this sort of like muscle that's been worked between my heart and my mouth, and I'm constantly, you know, utilizing that muscle and getting stronger and stronger in the ways that I communicate what I'm needing, what I'm feeling. Another thing that I've learned in relationships is that it's okay to be angry, frustrated, and hurt. I used to have this thought of like, so if ever I'm upset, I need to make sure that the way that I communicate my hurt is grounded and that I have my shit together, and that when I do it, you know, everything needs to be said nicely and kindly, which I get to a point. But I've also only recently realized in relationship that sometimes that can minimize your experience, and sometimes that can dim the importance of what you need to share. There is this concept called te tiro whakarongo, which is to be the observer of your thoughts and your feelings and the way that you're operating in the world. I think if you can keep that as you express, that's where you're sort of mastering that expression, where you know, okay, they're seeing me upset, they're seeing me hurt, they're seeing me frustrated, but I still know what I'm doing. And I'm still aware that this expression is authentic and it's real and it's angry and it's all the things, and it's not doing more damage to this relationship, which can be really tricky to master, because often we can go on a tangent and our ego starts coming and we say all the things. So I feel like I'm still refining that. Probably the last thing I would say in relationships is that everyone is where they're supposed to be, and that it's never my job to analyze, fix, or share a solution or share what I think's good for them unless it's been asked of me. And even if it has been asked of me, I also get to decide whether or not it's helping for me to share my perspective. So that's also been tricky because I'm a coach. I've found it really challenging sometimes to just be Ari and just be a listener and a soundboard, that I don't need to help people unpack their life in every conversation. I don't need to give you a tool, you know, like that sometimes that in itself, a lot of the time, that in itself is what someone needs, is just to be seen and heard and met and comforted, and not feel like a project. So for me, I really had to address that within myself in relationships. that people are not projects, they're people and they're humans and they have feelings and they're allowed to have those feelings, they're allowed to express them. If I feel like I don't have the capacity to hold space for that, that's on me to communicate that and to be aware of my own energetic boundaries. So yeah, there's a lot there that I just shared, but so much I have learned in relationships. I think that's where we learn the most.
Yes, absolutely. Because like you were mentioning to me before, the things that happen with other people are those mirror reflections of yourself and what's happening within. Because there's so much coming up for me, and one thing that keeps coming up is my last relationship. There was, and that was about probably started the relationship. How am I 28? I was about 21, I think. So it was about 7 years ago, but there's still things that we hold on to. And now I'm in the space that I can reflect and I can be like, oh, okay, like I see where this was coming from. And an example of the sort of, mirror reflection and also the creator of your own destiny sort of comes into play with this is that I don't know how it first started, but pretty much from the get-go, there was cheating from his part. Like he was cheating on me pretty much every weekend, really. And I always had this gut feeling of like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And the more that I felt like this is what's happening, and I'd question it, and then I'd be made to feel like I was crazy and all of those sorts of things. I with the whole creator of your own destiny and the manifestation of like, what sort of plays out, it's the more that you focus on, the more that that's going to continue to happen. And it's really true because that's all I would think about. I feel like I could not, I felt like I needed to be with that person every hour of the day or know what they're doing every hour of the day, because I didn't trust that when they weren't with me that they weren't doing anything that would hurt me. And so it's like a massive part to reflect on. And that whole relationship, like I left that relationship, and I'll explain a little bit about that afterwards, but I left that relationship and I blamed everything on him, like it's all his fault. I would, and other people felt the same about him. So I was like, oh, mean. Like I didn't purposefully go and have conversations with those people consciously to like put him down, but I knew that if I had conversations with these people to express what had happened to me, I knew that they would back me up and be on my side. And the whole, what you mentioned before about it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, and clearly I wasn't seeing the lesson, hence why it continues to happen. And what sort of ended up happening was I actually it got to a point where the cheating had stopped because I had sort of stood up for myself and said I'm going to leave, and the cheating had sort of stopped. And then so to prove himself to me, like he would just stay home all the time and play on the PlayStation. And so now the PlayStation triggers me because I'm like, oh, like, with everything that happened then. And so with that circumstance, I actually sort of felt like it was less cheating with people and more now it's like the same vibe but with a PlayStation, like constantly on it every hour of the day, all through the night, and just that connection was lost. It just wasn't there. And so I sort of had to go through a pretty big, like the universe was just like, bloody hell, Chelsea, I'm going to slap you in the face now because clearly like you're not learning anything from this. And I ended up like just getting really depressed and feeling very, I'm going to put a little trigger warning here just for those that are listening in regards to suicide and things like that. This is what's going to be mentioned just now. So please feel free to leave this conversation if you need to, or stick around. I started to get very suicidal, and there was one day that I woke up and he had gone to work and I was needing to go to work, and I'd messaged him and I said, please, can you come home? Because I feel like if I need to get in my car right now, I am not going to get out of it unless it's via like an ambulance or, you know, going to hospital. And that was because what had sort of happened was, over that time where he was playing PlayStation and doing all those things, I didn't feel like I could go out, because if I left the house, he might still cheat on me, even though he hadn't done it in a very long time. So I made myself stay in the house, in my room, and I was pretty much just bound to my room for months, unless we were going out somewhere ourselves, or unless we were going to work or things like that. And I just got to that point where I was like, I was at a point where it was going to happen if I didn't reach out and ask for help. And I reached out to him and he came home, and something happened where he was supportive and he was there for me. But I was having a bath one night and I started crying and I didn't know why. And he got me out and dressed and put me into bed and things like that. He brought the PlayStation into the room to play it in the room, so he was still near me, and, you know, beside me. And that was still quite triggering, because I was like, I just need you, you know. And then the next day or a few days later, or however it was at the time, something happened and he said, oh, you're not going to have a sook like you did last night, are you? Or something like that, talking about the bath situation. And then something just in my head switched and I was like, whoa, what am I doing here? Like, it was this weird feeling of like, oh, I get to leave now. I don't need to be here anymore. Because that for me was like, how could you actually say that to someone if you really cared about their mental health and well-being and just them as a person? And so, yeah, like I said, I left that relationship. That was pretty much the moment for me where I was like, oh, I don't need to be here anymore. And from there, I continued to blame him, and I continued to have that as my story. My story was that I was in what some could say was like a mentally, emotionally draining or abusive sort of relationship. And that was my story. And that was where I stayed victim. I stayed victim from that relationship. I continued that for years, and I continued to put myself in situations with other guys and felt that way, until I started learning what you just mentioned, was around things happening for you, not to you. And there's lessons in everything that's happening. And I started to switch my mentality. And when I did, I now actually have like love and forgiveness for himself and myself within that situation. And I can actually let that go. Like, I don't blame him now for anything that has gone on. And that I feel like that's really powerful when you get to that point, because you do release what they did to you, and you realize, like, you know, there was lessons I wasn't learning. There was things that were being shown to me that I needed to practice or learn or change within myself. And I think a lot of the time in relationships, we always just blame the other person. It's the other person's fault. And I'm not condoning at all like cheating and abusive, manipulative, like narcissistic sort of behavior. But we have choices in those spaces. And my choice was to continue to stay in that space and to continue to blame him. So rather than, you know, separating and leaving that and saying, okay, let's separate us in this situation and do what it is that we need to do for ourselves, because clearly this isn't the right space for both of us. But we do get caught up in love, like what we think is the love in that time. And we definitely did love each other in that time. But it's just one of those things that people get like really stuck in. But I feel like what you've mentioned about working on yourself and having those conversations with yourself, I feel like it definitely does make it easier to have conversations with other people and to process things. And it doesn't mean you need to stay with them, but to still be able to have those conversations as adults. And when I say adults, I just more mean in like a mature way, like we're not reacting about something that is, this minor issue. It's really because of this big thing that's going on over here, right?
Yeah, what's happening in front of you is just a byproduct of other layers that are asking to be met with. One of the things that I started to think about as you were sharing your story, Chels, is just how frequently, how often we abandon ourselves when we're in relationships, for the sake of love. There's justification there because this is what I need to do to save the relationship, or I need to do this, I need to do that. There's the victim mentality is kind of like a permission slip to stay in an old identity that feels familiar, and familiarity is what feels safe for us oftentimes, and that inner child in us is familiar with chaos probably, and is simultaneously asking to be heard and seen. So it's this weird sort of cycle that we all sort of indulge in, where the abandonment wound that we experience as children becomes the behavior that we participate in within ourselves every time we self-betray. And that's what we're doing when we're tolerating things that aren't in alignment, are less than what we deserve. And so it's that, again, I guess, well, not again, it's about understanding what you believe about your worth, what you believe about yourself, and standing in your mana and your motive of what you were innately born with. We believe that the things that we experience determine the level of worthiness that we should be operating in. And it is unfortunate, but then at the same time, it's only through those experiences that we grow deeper in love with ourselves and our purpose and who we really are. I think too, because you were talking about the victim mentality of things happening for you and not to you, I feel that the process to tell a different story, it's not, I get a little bit of internal conflict, because I think it is good to tell a different story, but if you tell a different story too soon, you can spiritually bypass what you have to actually move through. So you will continue to not learn the lesson if you're not willing to meet with the mess and the darker parts and the pain that is being presented. And then also just knowing, like, a lot of us just don't know how to be with that, and it's scary to be with that.
Yeah.
Because those parts of us are very confronting, and it's also very confronting to be in a mentally and emotionally abusive or whatever, that type of relationship, and to admit, yeah, I played a part in that. And I contributed to what's happened here. And the stories that I told myself in the moments where I felt so amplified, that was me contributing to my experience. And I get to take ownership and responsibility of that.
Yeah.
One thing that came up recently for me when it comes to my attachment to my past relationships and childhood experiences is that I had let go of the person, but I had not yet let go of my attachment to the memory of the person. Memory is what shapes and changes our vibrational makeup.
Yeah.
And because I was unaware of how tightly I was clinging on to that memory, I didn't recognize the dependency that I had created around this memory. So every time I thought of that experience or thought of anything to do with that person, it was almost like a dopamine hit,
Yeah.
an addiction, or anything that was related to that was kind of feeding into what was still left there, what I was still attached to. And I think we all have those ties. And it's not until we're made aware of what those ties are throughout our journey, and it's not until we are doing the observing that we recognize, oh, okay, so the story I'm telling myself about that memory is this, this, and this. And I am, even if I don't say this story out loud, it's happening subconsciously. It's happening in the background, and it's replaying over and over and over again. And this is why I keep participating in behaviors that don't serve me, that don't align. And it's confusing. I'm like, why am I doing this thing? Like, I know what my intention is. I know why I want to do this, and I know it's going to benefit me, yet I'm still participating in this behavior. What is it about this? And so bringing what's in the darkness into the light is what this journey is all about. But seeing that thing as a gift,
Yeah.
seeing that thing as a really important part of being the catalyst in your healing journey. And that's what it sounds like happened for you when you had that moment of realization where you were like, oh my gosh, I have a choice.
Yeah.
I can leave. A lot of us tell a story that we don't.
Yeah.
That we don't have a choice. And the thing about being in New Zealand, Australia, sort of westernized countries, is that we have so much choice, and we're in this bubble of like privilege.
Yeah.
That we can sit here and say, I'm going to choose who I want to be with. I'm going to choose, the path that I take. I had this audacious dream that I'm going to create this business. I'm going to do this, do this, do this. The fact that we have that opportunity and that choice is far greater than the majority of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We're a part of like the 2% of the world that has that much choice.
Yeah.
And there are so many other countries where that is absolutely not available, and it's such a battle to even speak your truth or have a conversation.
Yeah.
So what a blessing it is to be here. At the same time, let's not belittle or minimize our experience and our hurt, because that's valuable and needs our presence too. That's one thing I noticed from what you shared about your relationship too, is that what you were craving was presence.
Mm.
You just wanted time, and you wanted it from him. But I think what we often do is we make it other people's responsibility to bring what we desire into our life, when actually it's my job to be present with me. And in that moment of realization, you got to be there.
Yeah.
And that's when you took aligned action to choose a life that meant that you were no longer going to be what was the pathway to releasing yourself from victimhood mentality.
Yeah. Do you think that do you have any thoughts or whakaaro around um like grief from relationships? So like, a partnership with somebody else, that it may relate obviously to, parents, siblings, friends, especially, and things like that. Do you have any thoughts around grief, like within relationships?
I feel, yes, I feel like relationships is where we experience a lot of grief, but if we don't understand the stages of it, we can feel a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
And that it's also not linear, because we can often bounce between the different phases and stages.
Yeah.
I also think that we can grieve not only a person, but the life that we dreamed of with that person, and the whole, the story of us living in the house and having the kids and doing the things together and, creating this life. So not only are we grieving the individual's company and their presence and their communication and their, the memories of what you were together, you're also grieving what could have been. And so the stages of grief, I feel, what I know of grief is that initially there is that shock denial experience where you almost feel quite numbed by the experience, and then you move into like anger and frustration, and that can quickly move into like feelings of sadness and depression and hurt and things like that. As you go into the deeper layers of your emotional experience, it's bringing forward that inner child and that young adult and all different versions of you that felt that pain before, and it's all comes forward in this grief. And then there's the bargaining. Well, if you do this, then I will.
Yeah.
Well, if you do this, then I will. And then that typically, sort of depending on your awareness, you know, you can start to really be with the emotion and be with what's happened and begin to sort of understand, okay, so this is what's actually going on here. Because I understand this, then maybe eventually I can come into a space of seeing the lesson. Like we said, I can reflect and see the lesson, and I can also now accept what has happened. But there are so many layers to relationships that you almost grieve every single layer.
Yeah.
So sometimes it feels like I'm back here again, but it's not that you're back here again. It's that the first time you went through this, you were only ready for this level of grief and to move through this particular scenario or situation. So now you're ready for the next one and the next one and the next one. And then if you're kind of stuck in that depression, sadness phase, and then you move through it, but then something else in life triggers you, and so you go back to the frustration, grief, anger, you know, so you can ping pong between these different stages. And I feel like the level of grief that happens in relationships when you're having to separate from a person that's still here is really hard because they're still here. And versus when someone passes away, like there's nothing you can do. They're gone, and you just there is no sort of bringing them back, but there's always this lingering feeling post breakups, whether it's with friends or partners or family members, because you can break up with all of them, where you wonder, you know, will they be back in my life again? You know, will we be able to make amends? Will we be able to come to a place of acceptance and love each other maybe in a new way? But if we attach to this what if, then there can also be this dependency that happens there too. So long story short, grief is just this thing that's all over the place. But if you know that you've felt all of those things and losing someone, that's completely normal. And you have the awareness to hold yourself through that stage and to know, okay, so right now I'm feeling quite depressed or quite sad about this. And so I'm just going to be with this. It's normal for me to grieve, because grief is just proof that love was there.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be with this and honor this and comfort myself and ask what I need.
Yeah.
And the same for every stage of it. So I think we start to learn as well, if we're constantly in communication with ourselves, we start to learn how best to be there for ourselves. And that's been a real big lesson for me lately, is my soul is demanding that I be there for myself in a way that's a little bit deeper, a little bit more intimate than it's ever been before. Because when you're evolving into these new levels of expansion and you're pursuing your dreams and your visions and all of that, you can't be old Addie, you can't be old Chels, you know, you've got to be aware of what needs to be let go of. And you can grieve these versions of yourself too. So grief in relationships is kind of like a more tangible experience to what we naturally grieve every single day when we're going through this healing journey. We just have different attachments, different levels of attachments to things, and depending on how attached we are is dependent on how difficult that process will be. Yeah.
I think also what keeps coming up is, a lot of people talk about we need to get into the space of having compassion for the other person and understanding the other person has come from, this situation, and these are their insecurities that they were, acting from, and things like that. And that is really important. Like, once you get to a place through that grieving process that you can actually, it's a beautiful place to be able to have compassion for someone and be like, oh, they were acting from a place that they knew to act from. They didn't know any different. And that's really beautiful when you can get there. But I think a lot of people forget about the compassion that you need to, and the forgiveness that you need to have for yourself. Because a lot of what I've just not just realized, but it's just something that sort of just came to me, was that we always not worry, or I guess I could say worry or think about how we're going to react to other people, and how whether we're reacting or responding, or whether we are having compassion for them yet, are we at that place yet for other people. But we always forget about ourselves, and it's just one of those things that I think needs to be looked at a lot more, because we might have done things to other people, but in that process we've continued to do a whole bunch more to ourselves, and that, I feel, is the whole bunch more is the reaffirming of patterns or beliefs or things that we think to be true. For example, in those situations, I'm not worthy of love, or I'm not worthy of this love that I really crave and desire. So I continue to keep putting myself into situations where I'm not going to have that type of love. And so throughout it, like, a way to sort of look at it, to be able to have that love for yourself and to switch back, okay, how am I going to show myself compassion and myself forgiveness, is actually just looking at your life as a movie or a 3D sort of projection of what goes on internally for you. And just seeing every person as, like, this is your movie that you're creating. And in a sense where you're able to detach from the feelings or the attachments, I guess, that you had to those people, and be like, okay, now where's the lesson in this? Like, what do I need to learn for myself too? Not just always focusing on other people and what other people need or want or desire, because this is your life. Like, you get to create it how you want to create it. And as long as what kept coming up as well is, you can say this in Te Reo Māori for me, because I can't remember exactly how it goes, but is it like in a conversation or in a situation, try to, I think it was you that said it to me, was try to be in that space of not like diminishing someone else's power and your power in the same space. So being able to have those conversations or be in those relationships and not like take away people's power, because we're each living our own lives. And yes, we might act from a place of hurt and things like that, but if at the last resort sort of thing, if we need to have a conversation and say to someone, hey, this is not the way to go about things, or this is not what I need right now, it's still important, I feel, that we're not going into that. Yes, we can be angry and hurt, but not intentionally wanting to put that other person down just for the sake of like what we need. Because at the end of the day, that happened 7 years ago, and I don't feel the same way as what I was feeling in that exact moment about the situation. It's hard to do. It's hard to be in those moments where you're so angry and you're so frustrated and you're trying to think about what you need. But they've pissed you off, or they've done something to you that's so hurtful and so horrible that you probably do react a lot more. But in the sense of not trying to, put the other person down at the same time as not putting yourself down, you are actually showing yourself love in that situation too. So there's so many times and so many circumstances where you can actually show yourself the love and the compassion at the same time as getting your needs met, or expressing how you feel and what you're wanting, or expressing that someone has made you feel a certain way at a certain point. But what I'm saying, right? When I said how does that go into Te Reo Māori? Because it sounds a lot nicer.
I think what you're speaking about is to not whakaiti, is to diminish someone else's mana. So I think the whakaaro there is that everybody, I get a sense that our mana and our mauri is very much like our worthiness. And if there is a way that we can communicate our hurt without whakaiti te mana or tohua, without sort of making that person feel small, then you maintain dignity. And I think that's one of the most graceful and honorable things that you can do. And it's very, as you say, it's a practice and a skill to be able to communicate what you need to communicate without belittling, without whakaiti. I feel that the times where we do lean into that behavior, it's probably because that's what we're doing in our own internal world, where we are diminishing our own worth, the worthiness of our anger, the worthiness of our hurt, the worthiness of love, desires, whatever it is that we are consciously or subconsciously telling ourselves that we're not worthy of. We're doing that inside. We're already having that conversation before it's come out of our mouth. So I feel this way, and I'm going to project how I feel in this conversation, because what you've done has triggered something within me that I'm not happy with within myself. And that's your fault, and typically that's kind of what tends to happen. But there was something you said there around, you can come to a place of communicating without putting the other person down, holding compassion for yourself. I think that there is this internal dialogue, or these expectations that we can hold of ourselves, that when we don't meet it, the need to whakaiti someone or to punish someone for their behavior is probably, again, how we're operating within ourselves. So because I don't have compassion for myself, I'm going to punish myself for the expectation that I placed upon myself that I did not meet.
Yeah.
And that is such a, such a, what's the word? Like, that's the way society shapes us. That if you do something wrong, you should be punished, that there's got to be a consequence.
Yeah.
And it's my job to enforce that consequence. And I get it, but it can be taken too far, and we can continue to stay in this space of unworthiness, to whakaiti our own mana, because of one thing that we did or didn't do, or two things that we did or didn't do. So because I did this, I'm going to continue to believe my worthiness is this level, because this is the punishment I deserve.
Yeah.
For that thing that I did or didn't do. So the compassion and the forgiveness that is required for ourselves is to understand that I only knew what I knew. Yeah. And now I know better. Now I know better. And so now I have the opportunity to go back to that part of me and to look myself in the eye, whether I was a little girl, a teenager, or a young adult. Maybe it was me last week, where I get to look into my own eyes and say, I forgive you for what you did when you didn't know, or when you were unconscious to what you were actually doing. And I take these moments where I'm going off track as opportunities to understand, okay, now that I'm in a space of groundedness and I can see things from a higher lens as a director of my movie, I can look at this and go, okay, so this is what happened here. And now I've learnt my tendencies, I've learnt what to look out for, I've learnt the spaces that I'm needing to strengthen my whakakaha, to strengthen my mana, and to strengthen my voice. And to know also that anytime there is dialogue happening in my mind that is diminishing, that is to whakaiti taku mana, that's not my voice. That is absolutely not my voice. That's the voice of somebody else that I've heard before, or it's the voice of a narrative believes that my worthiness is at this point, or my mana is at this point, but nobody can diminish it unless I allow them to. And actually, it never really ever changes. It remains as it is. It's just our perspective of it shifts, changes. And so that's the only thing that's bending, because the mana itself, the worthiness itself, is immovable, unshakable. It is always what it is.
Yeah.
And it is the thing that connects all of us as human beings. Like, we all have mana, we all have mauri, we all have worthiness. We're born that way innately. And we can say that so effortlessly when we speak about children.
Yes.
But somehow there is something that switches in our brain throughout our experiences where we convince ourselves and justify why we're not.
Yeah.
Why I'm different is because this is what happened to me. But if what happened to you happened to your child, does that change their worthiness? Does that change their mana? Does that change their mauri? No, it doesn't. So why are you different when it comes to that? So the compassion and the forgiveness, I feel, is a process too, and grief is a part of that.
Yeah.
Because when you are showing compassion and forgiveness, how you've gotten to that point is you're probably grieving a version of yourself, or you're grieving the release or the letting go of an attachment to a memory or a person or anything like that. So the feeling part, I think, is a part of, to get to compassion is, yeah, I can choose to be compassionate. I can choose to forgive. That's not going to happen straight away.
Yeah.
And I'm kidding myself if it is. You know, I'm not being authentic and honest because, one, I'm a human.
Yeah.
And to deny the hurt that I've experienced from this situation is to just suppress. And that's where we get into those stages of depression. You know, when you're talking about your relationship, anytime we minimize our experience and don't let it be fully expressed in the way that it needs to be, we say to ourselves, you can't be you.
Yeah.
And that can be really, think of a little girl or a little boy in full expression, and you go, no, you can't be you. And the look on their face.
Yeah.
Oh, why can't I be me?
That's probably, well, probably for me, the first place to start. Like, if I was ever to support anyone else about, you know, in regards to healing and awareness and things like that, when you speak about a child and then you speak about yourself, I feel like, for me anyway, it helped so much. I'm not perfect now. Like, I still, you know, speak to myself or about myself in a way that's not powerful at all. But I'm definitely in the space of changing that. But whenever I think about, you know, if I was to ever talk to my daughters like that, and the way that I speak to myself, I'm like, oh, okay. So I need to shift this, because this is diminishing, yeah, like my own power and also something that I recently am, it's something I've said out loud, but I'm still processing how it looks. But in me speaking to myself the way that I do, I'm allowing what others have said to me, I'm allowing others' trauma and insecurities to dictate what I say to myself and where my life heads. That I can look at that in different ways of, whether I step out of fear and create a business, or post a makeup video on YouTube, or whatever it is that I would love to do because I want to do the thing. I put myself down because I'm worried about what others think. Well, there's lots of things that come through with that. But when we think about ourselves as a child, like play is where the excitement and the joy and the happiness comes from. And that's all children do. Like, children don't know how to pay taxes, and they don't know how to do all the things. That's not a worry for them right now. All they're worried about is the fact that their colored pencil doesn't color in properly, or their toy is whatever the situation is, through play. But they pick themselves up, they do something different, choose something different, or they ask for help, or they do all the things. And so I think we could learn a lot from children, and a lot of us don't understand that fully. Like, I even still catch myself sometimes thinking that I'm the boss of my children, when really that's not the case, and they're actually teaching me to be a woman that I really love and would want to be. So yeah, that's probably definitely something we can learn from as children. And that was a really beautiful thing to bring up. I sort of went on a bit of a tangent with that, but I feel like when we're starting our journey of healing and personal development and things like that, and normalizing these sorts of conversations, I think it's really important to start with, firstly, would you speak to your you as a child, or your children in that way, or just any child. But then also understanding, like, if something like this was to happen to a child, how would we show compassion for that little child, and bringing it back to ourselves. And so, in speaking about children, I have 4 questions. I think it's 4 that I always, sorry, no, it's 3, plus I've got a 4th one that I always ask people that come on here. So the first one is, what is one thing you would say to your younger self?
It's for me, it's not so much what I'd say, but how I'd say it. And just imagining myself in a room with her, and just walking straight up to her and coming down at her level and looking at her deep in her eyes and holding that cute little face. And just really, with so much intention, just say, I got you, and you got this. Just with so much love and compassion and intention, just really like, I got you, you got this. And to know that someone has got you, and to believe it. There's a part of a person, I feel like, when you know that you are so held and you're so supported, and that someone else believes in you, you think you can do everything. You can do anything.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's what I'd say. But the key thing is, it's the way you say it. And it's the level of intention that you bring to what you deliver. Because I can say, I got you, but not mean it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that intimacy and that energy that comes with it that I think is really important. And that's what I'd intend to bring.
Yeah.
As a level of communication to my inner child that isn't just words. It's energy and it's action to follow.
Yeah.
And it's this big bubble of support and love and encouragement, and And I will also be firm, you know, I will also be honest with the way I communicate too. I got you. We got this.
Yeah. And I think that, I feel like with what we said before about think about how we would speak to our younger self, it's the how, and then bringing that into like the now as well. So what you've just said is not only something that we can say to our younger selves and cheer them on from where we're at now, but also it's something that we can continue to say to ourselves now for the future self that we are becoming, or that we already are, but we're in this now, this present moment. That's something that we can bring back once we've been able to express and understand the level of intimacy that can be had when you're thinking about your younger self. Then once you've understood that you can still do that, you can still speak to that younger self right now, that you can actually bring it back to who you are right now in this moment and say that same thing, looking at yourself in the mirror or just visualizing in your mind whatever like suits you, but actually saying it now too is just as powerful.
I think I imagine it like we're holding hands and I'm bringing her into this life with me, and I'm like looking at her like, I got you, we got this, and it's like, let's go, and you're doing this with me always. You're always with me, you're always there, because I need you. I need you in this journey. Without that part, that playful, creative, expressive, sassy, fun, emotive, spontaneous version of me, I am putting a cap on who I am. And when I say, I got you, we got this, she knows that she can be all of that.
Yeah.
That's her permission slip to go and to just be who she's here to be. And I am the vessel that she utilizes me today. I am the vessel of expression where she gets to be embodied.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It just actually makes me like,
wholesome.
a wholesome feeling. What is one thing that you are so proud of yourself for?
Choosing me.
Yeah.
And putting myself as a priority. That changed everything for me. That the flow-on effect of putting myself as a priority is where everything changed for me. And in choosing me, there is forgiveness and compassion for all other parts of me. And choosing me, there is all this healing that happens, and there's all this dreaming that happens. And it's why I'm sitting here having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Because I chose to choose me, and that's what I'm most proud of. I also see too that one day when I do have children, that the fact that mum chose to heal, that mum chose herself, means that these kids are going to grow up knowing that they get to choose themselves as well. And it's not about self-indulgence and I'm the best type of thing, because when we choose ourselves, we're in our full expression. When we're in our full expression, we shine our light. When we shine our light, we show people how to do that too. And there's more light in the world, and we make massive change. We make massive impact, and we get to really like not minimize the impact of being ourselves, and like lean in on how incredibly high we can set our sights and not settle for any less.
Yeah. And it's not selfish to do that. Like it's like if we start really not small, but it's a big thing. But if we start with something majority of us can understand, what you just mentioned about children is that people think that they need to continue to give to their children every single day, and that's what's going to make the difference in that child's life. But if you're continuously giving to your children and not to yourself, and not working on yourself, then you're actually taking away a lot, like, from that child, and the lessons that can be taught and things like that, because we're so focused on the things that are like around, like they need to have this and this and this and this. But yes, they need to have presents. That's one thing I feel is very important to give to your children. But the only way I feel like you can actually give presents is if you have that within, and you're able to be present in moments with yourself. And I'm not perfect, but I work on it constantly so that I'm not continuing to put the baggage of, the people before me onto my children now, and working and on myself, and actually being, I'm going to say selfish, even though I just said it's not selfish, but it's, when I say it's not selfish, it's not what society says is, oh, you're so selfish, you don't even think about your kids, or you don't even, this is the reason why we're doing this, is for our children, for the people that are coming next. Because, if you think of the people that have come before you, they've gone through so much, and there's still so much that they didn't get to understand in the lifetime that they're in now. And we're here to break those. People talk about generational trauma and generational cycles and things, and that's the continuation of things that keep happening because we haven't worked on ourselves. And it's, that's where it's important to recognize that you're not being a selfish person in a horrible sense. You're being, like, in a negative sense, you're being a selfish person in the most positive way that anyone could be. And in doing that, you're actually giving to your children, because you're going to be able to give them more of you. You're going to have more capacity, more awareness, more understanding. You're going to understand them more. They're going to understand themselves more. Like, there's so much more to it. So I guess my little thing that I could say to anyone that's watching is, whether you have children or not, it's really important that you become selfish in the most positive way that you can, and start, just dabbling. Don't feel like you need to get to a certain level straight away. Like, just start dabbling in growth and healing and development, and start recognizing that it's actually where a lot of us need to be. That's a lot of the space that we need to be in. So yeah, that's really beautiful. I have one last question of my own that's a bit of a cheeky, funny sort of one. And then I also have the fourth question is from the person that I had on prior to you. And so they give me a question at the end of each one when I speak to them. So I'll ask you that after this one. So the last one that I have to ask is, what is your favorite ice cream?
Ice cream. I really like jelly tip, like, but the one that's like in the tub.
Yes. Yes. Get on the stick, eh?
Like, because I don't like them. I like them all together, mushed together. Yeah, I like jelly tip and cookies and cream.
Yum. Okay, I'm just going to see if I can bring it up. I do remember it, but I want to say it from this person. Where are we? It was. What is one thing you just cannot wrap your head around?
Ooh. Oh, I might need some time for this.
I should have asked you before I asked you about the ice cream.
One thing I can't wrap my head around.
Just even right now in this moment, something that might be happening for you, or something that you haven't been able to unpack or understand it just yet. Which, for those that are listening, that is beautiful. We don't need to know everything. We don't need to be able to unpack everything right now. There's the time and the place for that too.
I guess what I'm still wrapping my head around is the way that so when you know something, going from when you know something to when you are something is, and I don't know if I'll ever have my head wrapped around it, is that gap in between the applicate, like as you're applying these things that you know, and you're making these changes in your life, there are still times where I feel like I can't quite wrap my head around the things that I miss, that I already know, like I know it, but I'm still, I don't know if this even makes sense, but I'm still learning to really be okay with not knowing, and I'm still learning to be okay with why I personally slip back into this cyclic behavior where I think that whole victim thing that you're talking about before, that's definitely a place that I go from time to time, and sometimes I can't wrap my head around that. I know what I know, yet I still go there. Like, and I've learned that lesson in so many different ways, but I still go there. Like, why is it that we as human beings feel the need to stay attached to being the victim? I think there are lots of, I could probably give reasons for that, but I want to know why that's so hard sometimes, and why it's so cyclic. And for me, what missing pieces I don't know yet. I feel like there are so many components, so many variables that contribute to why we do that, and I would like to actually know more about that, in a psychological sense, in a biological sense, in a spiritual sense. Tell me what all those layers look like, and I think that's going to be a lifelong thing.
Yes, it really is.
I don't know if that even made sense. I was just like rambling there, but that's kind of,
well, that's the point of it, right? Like, we're here to normalize these conversations, and it doesn't need to be this perfect, like expressed in this way that we think it should look. Like, if that made sense to you, it will make sense to others, and it will make sense to those that needed to hear that. And so I think that's the same with like what, we're normalizing these types of conversations so that other people can feel like they can have the imperfect conversation about this too. I know lots of people, when I have conversations with them, and they feel like the way that I speak, for example, is a place that where they want to be, but they feel like, oh, I don't mean to say it in this way, or oh, I'm mixing my words up and things like that's still perfect, because you're speaking, you're communicating, like you're letting me know how you feel, and that's important. Like, that's where it is. And I think that that's where a lot of people misunderstand. Like, you don't need to be so profound, and like if you are, then that's cool too, but like if you're not, then that's okay. Like, you're profound in your own way, and the people that hear what you have to say are meant to hear that, and in a way that they sort of take that on too. So thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's something that we're all trying to wrap our head around. Why do we keep going like this?
I think one thing that's come up a bit in this conversation is the idea of perfection.
Yes.
And perfection is everything that we are. We are this multifaceted expression of humanness, and that's perfect. And it can be difficult for us to see someone who's done wrong by us and say, that's perfect, because, oh my gosh, no. According to who? So to be perfectly flawed, to be in perfect acceptance of who you are, while simultaneously choosing to expand on what that looks like, and to grow and evolve, and to know that every part of this is divinely guided, and that that's perfect in every way, and that when we have compassion and love for ourselves rather than guilt and shame, that is a beautiful place to be. And being in guilt and shame is a beautiful place to be too, because if it weren't for those times where we experience the grit of life, our resilience and all these things that we now possess as human beings wouldn't be so good. Like, we wouldn't be so good at healing. Like, I feel like I've become so much better at this process, so much more accepting of this process, and that it is all part of it.
Well, the thing around, like, the last thing that I'll sort of say as well, and I think I said it in the last conversation I had on the last tea talk that I did, but something that I keep reminding myself is that I heard it on a podcast, and it was Mo Gaudet, I think that's how you say his name, and he said, in regards to being perfect, we think everything needs to be perfect, yet we find, this is how I interpreted what he sort of said as well, we find peace and gratitude and groundedness in a space that's imperfect, and that's nature, the beach, the forest. Like, you don't see straight lines at the beach or in a forest. The bark goes like this, the tree roots go like this, the ocean, you don't go to the ocean and say, like, oh, I just want to see the view, can you turn the sound off? Like, you take it all for what it is, and you don't, and the same with nature, and you actually find peace in that. So there's, like, it's not perfect, but it's beautiful and it's calming and it's peaceful. So that's sort of what I wanted to, like, end on, because we think everything needs to be a certain way, and we need to have these white walls and perfectly white couch and, like, no messy house or no messy life, no darkness. But the darkness, like you mentioned at the beginning, needs to be there. And so does the light, to come through. So yeah, that's what I sort of wanted to mention, because every time someone says something needs to be perfect, I think of where we find peace and gratitude and calmness every single time. No one goes to the forest and is like, oh, this is so stressful. Like, we go there for a reason, with the intention to find that, peace and gratitude and stuff. We don't go there to pick and choose what we want to see or what we want to be there. And there's no straight lines in the forest. So yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing so many parts of you throughout this, and your experiences and your knowledge and your wisdom. I told you guys at the beginning of this that wisdom was going to come, and it came. So thank you so much for sharing where you're at now, and just everything that you have learned. So grateful to have you in this space.
Thanks for having me. So the question that I want to ask for the next person, there's two that I have, so maybe you can choose which one.
Yes, I'll write them down. Otherwise I'll forget.
If fear were a person, what would you say to it?
Oh,
if fear were a person, what would you say to it? And the other question that comes in two parts, because that's what I do, is if you had 3 months to live, how would you live your life?
Yeah.
And then the second part to that question is, why don't you do that now?
Yes. How would you live your life? And why don't you do that now? Why, that's really cool that you had those two questions. Sorry, three questions technically. And it's really cool for the people that are on here to also reflect on that for themselves. So yeah, if you're watching this and you're reflecting on this, moving forward, I would love to know you know, what sort of came up for you. But until next time, love you so much, and thank you for showing up today for yourself and for me and for everyone watching.
Thank you.
Comment one takeaway below and share on your social media. Don't forget to tag me. Love you.